Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay.
Hello.
All right, everyone, we're just letting folks gather for a while, and then we will get this kicked off momentarily. Let's see, Henry Harper. This is probably Henry Harper's first Zoom ever.
Congratulations, Henry. We are growing up together.
It took a lot of work to try to get Henry up on this Zoom meeting.
My son lives in Atlanta. He is tired of me calling him, asking him questions about how to get on Zoom calls, okay?
That's good.
All right. Here we go. Just letting folks accumulate here. All right. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Hopefully, it's sunny here in Detroit. Hopefully, wherever you are, it's sunny. It looks like it's sunny in New York, Phil.
Yeah, got a lot of sun here. Very nice.
And we just want to welcome you to what is our final installation of this series of Studio Visit. And of course, I'll let Phil of C3 Arts in New York give the housekeeping tips today, and then we will introduce our guests for the afternoon.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Drake. And I want to give a special welcome to everyone this morning, and particularly a thank you. Now, we started Studio Visit maybe 7-8 weeks ago, and already we've seen the world kind of change as we've been doing this, and it's been quite a trip to say the least, but it's been fantastic on Saturdays that we've had this moment to gather and talk about and celebrate our artists, and not just artists, but the people in our art community, the gallerists, the collectors, like Taft and Sherida we'll be talking with soon in just a moment here, and for on. Now, we say that this is the end of of this initial installment of Studio Visit, but we'll be back very shortly. We're already very excited about the next group that is going to join us. We hope that this has been a as positive an experience for you as it has been for us as well. And we will be back. And on that note, we would like to make sure that we are connected with everyone so we can keep you updated. And also, we've created a kind of keepsake for the series. Is a digital catalog that will remind you and keep you acquainted with the artists and gallerists and the collectors that we've talked with over the past, say, 7-8 weeks or so. And also give you some resources for you to use as you go on and begin collecting or looking at this or begin your approach. Or for many people who are, of course, are very seasoned, we are talking to you as well. Of course, we would love for you. We will have a Q&A after the Parsons, as I like to call them. They look so cute. Give their presentation. Then we will have a Q&A, and I hope that you will join in on the Q&A. Of course, as much as there are some kind of long-held rules or ways to approach the art market or collecting, we know that it is a personal journey, and we would love to hear you share yours. So thank you and join with us. So if we don't have your email, please put your email down in the text box as well, and we'll keep in touch and we'll send you our catalog as well. Back to you, Drake.
All right, thank you, Phil. And I just want to say that, one thing I love, we began this series with our Morehouse brother, Emar Hutchins, and we get to end this series with our Morehouse brother, Taft. And so that is to me, that's just exactly icing on the cake. And it is, I don't think it's a coincidence that we all got that we are all Morehouse graduates, and that we all have a love for the arts, and that we all believe in furthering the culture in the best way that we can. And I think that this is a great way for us to culminate this particular series of talks, because Taft and Sherida represent, to me, the best of my generation. And they are going to share but a sampling, and they are a sampling of our collectors who exist that I don't think are necessarily highlighted very often. And I'm just glad that we have this opportunity to do this through the technology that we have. These kinds of talks are going on all over. And I saw a list today, and I'll make this brief. I saw a list that talked about all of the African-American galleries around it. My mother sent it to me, all around the country. And I thought, what an irony that they didn't even have Detroit on there, because Detroit is the largest African-American city in the United States, and not to have and has lots of collectors here. So not to have had an African-American gallery on there was pretty stark. But
yeah, I think that article was kind of funny. It didn't get into a lot. It was kind of a haphazard kind of collection of galleries. It was weird.
Yeah.
It was a good tip, though. It was a good resource.
Exactly. But without rambling on too much, I'll let Taft and Sherida take it from there. We'll let them go, because they have something nice prepared for all of us. So.
All right. Hello and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So I am Taft Parsons. This is my wife, Sherida. And we were invited by our good friend, Drake, to talk a bit about collecting art and show some choice sample pieces from our collection. I'll go with the disclaimer right up front that we are not professionals, But what I hope comes across is that, this is an activity and an endeavor that we have a passion for, collecting, displaying, and being able to share and talk about our stories, through fine art. And so hopefully, by the end of the talk today, that's really, a big part of what comes across as we go through the deck and the Q&A. Agreed? Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I just to start off, I think, I'll say my piece about my just kind of long interest in art, and Sherida can talk a little bit about her, where her interest started. I think mine really started from taking drawing classes, photography classes, in grade school all the way through high school. And so it wasn't kind of an academic appreciation of kind of the history of art, but it was really kind of understanding, being part of, and then later on appreciating the process that the artists go through to create the work. And so, as we comment on some of the pieces, hopefully that will come across, is that for me, it's really kind of understanding the process that the artist is going through as they create the work is really kind of what impresses me the most about the pieces that we collect.
And I would say that my journey in art began as a child, being influenced by my great-grandmothers and grandmothers who were seamstresses, who loved to decorate and expose me to a lot of things. And so I've always loved visual arts, but, was, geared more towards the performing arts with ballet and dance, but have always been drawn to color and texture. And so really, when I didn't have much, I always wanted to be surrounded by beauty, and would take the calendars and mat them and frame them and put them in my room as a child. And even in college, I had a whole collection of framed art from my budget as a college student that my friends would pop in to look at and see what I had changed. But it was, all on a budget for a college student, but that's who I've always been.
All right, we'll have an example of that in just a minute. You guys will get to see exactly what we're talking about. So Drake and Phil, unless there's something else, we'll bring up the slide deck and start just getting into it. Is that good with you?
Sounds good, Taft. Sounds good.
Yep.
All right.
Let's go with it.
Oop. Oh. All right. So, this is one of those pieces that Sherida was just talking about. It continues to be displayed in the Parsons collection. So do you just want to tell a little bit about the backstory with this one?
So I am originally from Alabama, and in between Tuskegee and a small town called Union Springs, there sits a lady, or she may not be there anymore, but in a trailer, and she has art and posters and Greek paraphernalia. And I was a freshman in college, and I saw this card that she had, and I was like, I love that, because it reminded me of things I had seen as a child in Ozark, Alabama. And so I bought the card, and then I got some matting, and I framed it. And so it's not fine art, it's actually a card, but it reminds me where I came from. It reminds me of home, and so it is displayed in our home. And that was part of my start.
And you know what though, and you laugh, but it's really about, art is supposed to be reflective of your journey, and that's what this is. Correct. It's part of my journey. I love it. I mean, I can't believe you made that. That's a good looking frame. You did some good math.
Yeah, and so the pieces that we have collected, a lot of them have a story attached to them. At this point, not all of them, but a lot of them continue to have a story attached to them. And I think that when Jumani Nnamdi was presenting, he kind of stressed that, while this is its own financial market, so to speak, it's its own industry. That part of the importance and the value of collecting isn't just the financial value, but also kind of the collection of our stories and the personal stories that are attached to the pieces of art. And so he really tried to stress that. And I think that this piece and several other pieces in the collection, we keep because they are meaningful simply to us. Not so much because they, if we put them into an auction, we know we'd get top dollar for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. So, I found this quote as I was doing the research, and, I think it speaks to kind of, what we really think about as we have decided to, in particular and primarily collect Black art, and so this is a quote from Charlie Palmer. He is a wonderful artist. We do have one of his pieces. It's not in the slide deck. So just saying this may be controversial, but Black art is the soul of Black folk. It's soulful art for us and by us when it is honest. I say honest because that's important. You can look at an artist's work and tell when it's genuine and from a soulful place, as opposed to Black art produced solely to make a living. And so, one of the things that's important is that we remember that, in history, art has been used to kind of tell people's stories. And for a long time, and still now, our story has been marginalized by the mainstream. You go into large museums, kind of the most prestigious places in the world, and they may have a small Black exhibit somewhere in there, but the featured art is generally going to be European fine art. And so within that body of work, when Black folks are represented, it's really kind of as a side note. We are kind of placed into scenes and pictures, almost like a prop or part of the furniture. And so if we are not represented in a way that we can connect with and understand, subconsciously, that marginalized version becomes our story. And so, us collecting this art and displaying it, and you'll see some references to how we think it affects the kids, is really kind of putting us to the forefront, and our story to the forefront. All right. So we thought we would kind of talk a little bit about different venues and places that people can collect art, because if you're a beginning collector or just interested in collecting and don't know where to start, the formal art world sometimes can be rather intimidating. To walk into a gallery or an exhibition or a large museum,
or an auction,
or a big auction can be quite off-putting a lot of times for someone who has not kind of been in and around the art scene. It also can be intimidating for us because there's a lot of spaces where we're really not welcome. People will question whether or not we really belong there. And so we wanted to kind of put a piece by Donald Calloway. He's a Center for Creative Studies graduate. He's a trained fine artist, and fortunately for, I think, the community here in Southeast Michigan, Donald Calloway he's like an art fair guru, and so he gets out there at multiple fairs every year and has some really wonderful pieces that he brings out. And he sits there and he connects with folks. And so, kind of as we came into Detroit, as we started to get one or two nickels to rub together, and we moved on from like framing, cards and calendar cutouts and stuff like that. Folks like Donald, we would walk around the local art fairs and look for the Black artists, and folks like Donald would be there. And so, you see the same guy at a couple of different art fairs, and you start talking to him.
And develop a friendship.
And develop a friendship, and it's through that, every year Donald has a big party. It's called Cheap Wine and Chicken. Mm-hmm. It was through going to one of the Cheap Wine and Chicken events that we met and were introduced to our current curator, Henry Harper, who's on, but I don't know if he figured out how to do the video and stuff. So you may not be able to see him. But kind of being connected to the art community has helped to further our ability to, kind of collect better pieces and be more educated about, what we're doing as we evaluate and purchase art.
And I would also say with the whole art fair scene, is be open, because you never know who you're talking to at an art fair. We've met some wonderfully trained artists at various art fairs in Chicago and Atlanta who have awesome educational pedigrees, but a lot of people may discount them because they are at an art fair. So Donald actually does wonderful portraiture and is trained at the College for Creative Studies. And so don't ever just think, oh, it's just an art fair, whatever, just a little piece to have. You never know who you're talking to and what their background is. And so I would say be open. And by going to art fairs, we met and developed some wonderful friendships with some wonderful artists who have very extensive backgrounds. But it's something that they like to do because they believe that art should be for everyone. And have various price points. And so they do things like art fairs, but then they also have galleries. And so I would just say be open and meet people.
I think it's interesting, you guys, because we think of the art fair and there's so many scales to it, right? So you have the art fair, which is more local and you can kind of interact. And then you have these mega art fairs that go
on.
on.
Art Basel, yeah.
Yeah, Art Basel, even Nada, you know, all these fairs, and they're popping up more and more and more, but they seem to be kind of bifurcating, kind of separating, you know, the kind of economies of the market, for example. Because so if you go to a smaller one, you feel this kind of closeness is surrounding you. You go to one of these bigger ones, of course, you feel this alienation. I mean, unless, you know, this is kind of your scene, you know?
Yeah, and Phil, right, and those bigger ones are usually run by the galleries themselves. You know, so there's kind of this group of art fairs where the artists just rent the booth. And then like the bigger ones, like you're talking about, it'll be the large scale galleries will rent booths, and then they'll bring representative pieces from their artists. And so, yes, those can, you know, it's really no different than stepping into a gallery, and those spaces can be intimidating for folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's move right along. I think you start on this one.
So this is actually one of my favorite pieces. I was a resident when I first saw this piece. It was hanging on the walls at Children's Hospital. And because I have a background in dance, actually danced all the way through college and was in A-League 2 for a short bit, I saw this and was immediately drawn to it. Was trying to figure out how I could get it. I did extra moonlighting so that I could kind of stack money so that I could afford it. So at Children's in the GMC, Children's Hospital of Michigan, Detroit Medical Center, they have someone who's responsible for community outreach and collecting art for the various hospitals. And so I reached out to that person and said, who is this by? How can I get in touch with this person? Is this for sale? And so I reached out to the artist. I let him know that I loved his work. We saw his work in various places around the Metro Detroit area. We connected with him because at the time when I was a resident, I still couldn't afford it. So we kind of just kept saving. And we actually did not purchase this piece, and he kind of held on to it for us. It stayed in Children's for a long time. And then we developed a friendship with Timothy Orikri, who is also trained and widely exhibited throughout the country. And actually internationally, he is originally from Nigeria. And he kind of like saved it for us and we were able to eventually purchase it. And so this to me just speaks to my love of dance. And at the time, our oldest daughter, she was just starting her journey in dance and was a toddler. And so this now hangs in her room because it's an inspiration to her. And she wants to actually pursue a career in dance. And so a lot of times, it's, we have Misty Copelands, of the world and other prominent prima ballerinas and dance companies now who are of color. But when I was growing up, not so much. We had, of course, Alvin Ailey and Dance Theater of Harlem, but we didn't have principal dancers in major companies, that were of color. And so to me, it was an inspiration to me to see this, but it continues to be an inspiration for my daughter who wants to be a dancer. And to know that, we worked and saved to get it and developed a friendship with the artist, it means a lot to me. It's very special to us.
Yeah, I'll add that, while I was not the dancer, this is also kind of one of my personal favorite pieces, because I think that, it really is reflective of displaying us in a very regal way that unfortunately a lot of our kids and us too, we didn't grow up seeing images of us, kind of as fine artists, as people that are contributing to the creativity and the culture. We're kind of given a stereotype, by mass media, and unless you counter that, unless you present the other side, that's what folks grow up with. And so, I think we mentioned that our oldest daughter, has taken and developed a passion for dance. And so I think, things like this are one of the reasons that she really has envisioned herself as being able to do this. You have to be represented. You have to see that representation to feel like things are possible.
And so that's her at Dance Theater of Harlem intensive.
It's her right in the middle.
With some of the master dancers of the Dance Theater of Harlem. So that was a proud moment for us.
And you know what? I see Kathleen Dill's comment, and I was going to say the same thing. I love that you're discussing the connection between the art and how it interfaces with real life and the raising of your children, you know, and the impact that it has. I mean, I just think it's a beautiful thing. And so, yeah, I commend you all even for even observing that layer of, you know, having that understanding of the connection. Because I mean, I guess I don't know if a lot of people do think about how that impacts your self-image, you know, our self-images, what we see in ourselves and our capabilities.
Yeah. So there's probably a couple other places where this would be an appropriate comment, but I think it is here. You know, there's a famous psychological experiment called the doll test that was used as part of the argument to desegregate schools back in the 1950s. During which black and white children were presented with a black baby doll and a white baby doll. And so they would just simply ask, which one do you think is nice? Which one do you think is ugly? Which one do you think might be honest? Which one might be sneaky? And so very reliably, young children would point at the black baby doll for all of the negative descriptors and at the white baby doll for all of the positive descriptors. And you know, it really just goes to show that even if you don't kind of purposefully say, this skin color is black, when all the images that you get every day for your whole life are that bad things surround these black people and good things surround these white people, it subconsciously gets ingrained. And unless there is a counter argument, unless people are presented with, hey, we have made valuable contributions to society, you are wonderful people, you are creative, you are smart, it really kind of affects the way that we live our lives, and we may not notice it on a day-to-day basis.
Excellent.
It's interesting, that whole, the story of how that piece came to be and the journey to get it, and then the impact that it had once you got it. It seems like that encompasses almost, and we were kind of hinting at it in the intro there about the personal aspect of the journey of collecting. And
yes. Yes.
And how it expands, because you learn as you're observing and learning about the pieces and the things that you're trying to get. It's fantastic. Now, what about the scale of that piece? If we move back to that.
That one is probably 3 feet by 5 feet. Yeah.
It's like 3 by 5.
I mean, it's a good sized piece.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah. There's one other one that Henry, it's a few slides further in the deck. Henry said that we have to make note of the scale of the piece. So when we get to it, we'll talk about how big it is.
All right, sounds good.
All right. So I'll start with this one. So a few years ago, just kind of perusing and browsing around online, we found a video about the Whitney plantation, which is down in Louisiana. It's between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And, one of the most interesting things is that it was constructed really to be the only plantation that told the story of slavery from the perspective of the slave. And, if for folks that have ever been on a plantation tour, what you will notice, and for us, it's very obvious that it's told from that kind of Gone with the Wind, wonderful antebellum South kind of feel. They really kind of minimize what happened to the slaves. They minimize our story. And so the Whitney, was unique in that it really said, we are telling the story from the other side, which I think is the more honest side. And at that point, I think we both were saying, oh, well, we want to go there. We want to see what this is all about. And, you know, it took a little while, but this last year, we were able to go there while we were doing a weekend in New Orleans. So we went out to the Whitney plantation, and, you know, it is powerful and striking to hear our story told honestly. And you see that picture in the lower right-hand corner was a series of statues that were made by the artist Woodrow Nash. He's based in Akron. And they're called the Children of the Whitney Plantation. And they're just these beautiful statues, very haunting, you know, because a lot of the tales of what happened were taken firsthand during the New Deal, the WPA, in the 1930s. Folks went and they, some people figured out that, hey, a lot of the people that actually were alive during slavery, they're getting old and a lot of them are dying. And so they went and did a lot of interviews of all of the different people that had lived during slavery. And a good percentage of them were children. And so that inspired Woodrow Nash to make the Children of the Whitney Plantation. And so when we went, I mean, it was just such a powerful experience. You know, we decided at that point that we wanted to have one of these statues for several different reasons. So let me just click one more time, because it's actually a video embedded if you look at the left. So we'll kind of get a full picture of the piece itself. Slightly connected but slightly disconnected story. We went to Ghana this past winter for the end of the year of return. And while we were in Ghana, you know, we had one day with our group where we went to the Elmina slave dungeon, you know, went, heard, saw, perceived the story of our ancestors that were taken through the door of no return. We walked through the door of no return. But one of the things that was done for us while we were there is that on the other side of that door, our group brought out one of the local village elders who did a restoration ceremony. And what it was to apologize for letting us go.
Yeah, and all the things that our ancestors endured, and to restore all of those rights that had been taken from us.
To restore our spiritual rights as African people. And then we turn back around, and on the other side of the door of no return, they have now labeled it the door of return, to welcome us back. And we came back through the door. Later on that day, we went and we had a naming ceremony where we were given our African names as if we were newborn babies that never left the continent. So after we came back from that and we finally located one of these pieces, you know, it was at a white gallery, and so we purchased it, and she had a name that I asked the gallerist about, and the gallerist, you know, did say that it wasn't given by Woodrow Nash. You know, he used to name the pieces, but he had not named this one, and so the gallery actually gave her the name. And so when we got her, you know, we decided to give her, you know, her African name, you know, as we had gotten when we went to Ghana. And so we changed her name to Afua Adia. And Afua is
the girl born on Friday,
which is also
my African given name, my birthright name.
And Adia has experienced sorrow. And so, you know, we see this piece as being particularly representative of our story. And if it, you know, we kind of thought of it as, you know, in slavery times when people would be freed and go north, and then they would try to purchase their own relatives and bring them to freedom. We see this piece as representative of that. And so even when we bought it, you know, even though part of what we do is we are, you know, kind of purchasing art to invest in the value of art, we both knew, even before we said it, that this is a piece we can't sell.
Okay.
You know, so this one will go with our family, with our kids, and because, you know, even just the thought that, you know, you would put something that represents people enslaved and sold as property back on a metaphorical auction block, we decided that that's not going to happen with this piece. All right. Okay. So this one is a piece that came to us by another Morehouse connection. So my Morehouse brother that I came in with freshman year, you know, we were talking about art when we were catching up in DC, and so he said, "Hey, you know, my sister is an artist, and you should really see some of her work." And so, you know, he directed me to her website, and she is a proud Spelman alum. And so, I mean, in looking at her website, I mean, it was just these gorgeous, beautiful pieces, you know, and so I think, you know, not just because of the kinship connect, the HBCU kinship connection, but I mean, just the work stands on its own. We said, hey, we have to get some of her work. And, you know, we chose this one. It was, in particular, you know, Henry, our curator, he always advises artists to create work that tells the story of their time. You know, because, you know, 200 years from now, you know, nobody's going to be pulling up what Google post happened in 2017. But what will be there and what will be representative is works of art. And so we chose this one because it was inspired by the death of Eric Garner. So the piece is titled "I Can Breathe." And what it did was it really took that tragic event in history and it turned it into a beautiful piece of art. So rather than giving the images of ending a man's life, which is what happened in reality, it gives the impression and the story of restoration. It shows how an embrace can be beautiful and not tragic.
And sadly, you know, it can speak to many others. So of recent, of course, George Floyd, but also even before Eric Garner, to me, it reminded me of all of our ancestors that we lost due to lynchings. And so unfortunately, this story, you know, keeps occurring, keeps happening. But when I saw this piece, it did move me to know that, you know, our ancestors, their spirits are reclaimed and we can honor them in this way. And so whenever I look at this piece, I feel still, it gives me some comfort whenever I see it. So I think it's one of my favorite pieces.
Now, to Taft and Sherida, is that an oil painting? Is that?
It is a collage. So there's acrylic, there's charcoal. I mean, when you get close to it, I mean, there's so much texture. There's pieces of fabric in there.
A mirrored image.
Yeah, there's a small mirror. There's a gold leaf. I mean, it's just an unbelievably rich piece of work. You know, and really that's actually why I wanted to include the certificate of authenticity as part of the slide deck for a couple of reasons. One is so that we can refer back to it. But you know, this is just something that I think is an extra for the artists themselves that may be on this call. You know, this certificate, like, I don't think I've seen one better than this for a couple of reasons. So it gives, you know, not just the specs of the piece, but it also gives us the narrative, what the artist was thinking. And at least for me, kind of knowing what the pieces of the parts of the piece and the kind of intricate details of the piece mean to the artist, and what was that thought process for including, like, the ibis bird and the eagles. that really helps me to connect with the piece itself. And she also included the exhibition history for this particular piece. So there in the bottom right, you see that it's got the exhibition history of the piece, which really helps, from our standpoint as a collector, to be able to, understand that the piece has been exhibited and holds a particular increase in value because of that exhibition history. So tip for the artists that are on, look at this, soak it in. That's an extra special touch that collectors will appreciate.
Yeah. So Taft, she's Oakland based.
Yes.
Okay.
She's based out in Oakland now.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So here's the regular academic slide deck portion of the talk. So since we're talking about kind of collecting and investing in art, I did want to kind of at least give a few bullet points for folks that may be interested. I pulled this off of Forbes, so it's I didn't just make it up myself. So first is that, if you're interested in collecting art for investment purposes, the first thing you have to be aware of is that, if you don't know what you're doing, it is risky. It's an illiquid asset, so the value of it is what the market commands. And so it's really kind of, do you understand the factors that go into what the market will command for a piece of work? To say whether or not it is worth the amount of money that it costs and whether or not it has potential to grow in value. You should always kind of look at art collecting as a medium to long-term investment. I think that some people see folks kind of flipping art pieces, and so that's just, unless you have the know-how and time to go peruse estate sales and you can understand when you found a gem that nobody else knows about, which is not most of us. You always want to look at it as something that over a long period of time, if you make good choices, the monetary value will increase. And just like with any other asset, you want to have a diverse art portfolio. So art diversifies your financial portfolio in and of itself. And within that, having a diverse art collection will help diversify that art portion of the portfolio too. So collect different artists. So don't go and buy all of one artist. That's a risky strategy. It's putting all your eggs in one basket. So, looks like our 4-year-old needs to have some cereal right now. So Sherida will be back in a minute.
Okay. I think it's so important, Taft, to I'm glad that you're pronouncing this, because in the media you see a lot of conversation that's again buying for personal value versus buying as investment, and there seems to be a dichotomy that's put there for a lot of people, and this is kind of getting at that it doesn't have to have this kind of dichotomy.
No, right. Exactly. You can, you can skillfully invest in pieces that you also connect with, so you can love the things that you are putting up on the wall. Now I will say, in all honesty, it makes it much harder to even think about selling the piece when you feel very connected to it. So it's not like, oh, I got a bunch of tech stocks, and when the value goes high, you just sell it. Nobody feels real connected to their tech stocks. So it does make it a bit more complex from that standpoint, but there's so much wonderful, great art that is what I'll call investment quality out there, that we should be able to find things that we not only love, but will also help to increase in worth and wealth. And this is a strategy that I will say wealthy white folks, for the most part, have used for generations, you know, to pass on wealth to their children. And it's something that we are generally not told about. You know, so the use of art, the use of antiquities such as, you know, furniture and other collectibles to pass on wealth to the next generation is a strategy that's been used since the beginning of time. But, you know, folks ain't real eager to let us in on that. And so this is one way to help increase the generational wealth that, you know, frankly, Black folks are behind in.
Yeah. And you know what? And, you know, I guess there's two things that come to mind at this point. But when you say that, when we talk about that, even with that being the case, even if we are able to gain entry into this higher end art collecting market, a lot of times the markets are right now being controlled by non-African Americans, non-Black folks.
Yeah, you know, there's definitely some of that going on. There have been articles in, you know, kind of financial magazines about kind of how Black art is a great investment right now because it's been undervalued for a long time. And so you do see some of that, I'll call it the commodification of our art and history. You know, I mean, it's just another example of us being Columbus. You know, and so you will see that some artists they'll get poached right out of art school, and they'll get set up with an exclusive contract with a white gallery, you know, who will try to sell their art for astronomically high prices, you know, and it's really just to enrich the gallerist, you know, at that point. And they're not connected to the well-being of the artists themselves, you know, because 2 years from now, the next hot thing is going to take over, and that's what they're going to be going for.
Right. And then that artist is kind of left with disillusionment because they started out at such a high, and then they fall flat, and then, you know, sometimes can't figure out why that is. And so it's important that when there are new emerging artists, you know, new graduates, that they, you know, really, you know, kind of pause and stop and think about signing on to galleries and having their first pieces without even an exhibition history, except at that gallery, you know, charge, you know, starting at such high price points. They really should consider that, take that into consideration. Yeah.
But I, you know, I will say that there's still, you know, even though that is happening, it's still a very small portion of a small number of working Black artists. There, you know, right underneath the surface, there are tons and tons of Black artists who are wanting to make a living doing this, who have not gotten the kind of attention of the right galleries, who later on likely will be very important in the academic body of work, and you know, they'll be a home run. There was a time when, you know, I think yesterday when we were kind of prepping, you know, there was a time when Romare Bearden, he was just Romy, you know, and so, you know, the people who kind of saw that value in his work and understood how important it was, you know, at that time when he was a working artist that had really not been recognized for the importance of what he was doing, you know, I mean, they are the ones who benefited, you know, financially and culturally by picking up his work at that time. And there's lots of art out there for, you know, that is reasonable. So just kind of these headlines, they shouldn't intimidate folks from kind of figuring out what they're doing and getting in and getting some wonderful art.
I think, you know, we have to talk a little bit, because I think it's very good to do the focus, because as we see all kind of parts of our society kind of now being examined in a different way. You're speaking on the way Black artists are kind of put through the system, so to speak. If you go to a very reputable MFA program or something, you're almost guaranteed to be in this kind of opening kind of salvo, so to speak. So yes. Big galleries, Karansky or whoever comes pick you up, a European gallery comes and picks you up. But you're so right, there's that period, you prove it or you get off the stick.
Yeah.
And this is kind of fooling people, and the way it has in other industries as well, whether you're in corporate or whatever, this kind of sense of this movement upward where it's an illusion. There's actually no movement up.
Right.
So we find these artists kind of hitting this ceiling, and then things falling apart. I think that's a very, very important assessment of what we see as we look around and see so many Black artists seeming to get these opportunities. The future is really in the foretelling or the foreseeing. 5 years from now, where will that artist be in tracking these people? Very, very important. Yeah.
Just two comments before we move on, because we're using up time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. One is under that join the community. Collectors who do well have a passion for the art. If you don't, it may not be for you. If you don't enjoy doing this and like spending time in, you know, kind of the culture and with the people who are doing this, then, you know, it's not something that you're going to like doing. And this does take time. It does take a bit of effort. But if you enjoy it, then it may be a great opportunity. And the last point, and I cannot stress this enough, especially if you're kind of moving from picking things that look nice on the wall to saying, I want to invest in things that are historically important and have investment value, is work with a professional. They're the ones that are going to help you find pieces that have growth potential. They're the ones that will advise you on auction bids when, you know, when Swans is coming up, you know, how do you know what to bid on an item? And they'll also kind of provide you education so that, you know, when you're not with your curator, you can also make informed choices as well. So I can't stress that enough. You know, so we've been working with Henry, and, you know, not only does he bring us great pieces, but he has also kind of helped us to identify great pieces on our own, you know, as we peruse the internet, go to galleries and exhibitions. So I can't stress that enough. All right, so, oops, hold on. All right, so I did want to kind of show, you know, like as we look for pieces and find pieces, how do you get a good inkling that something's going to increase in value? And Sydney had her own presentation a couple of weeks ago. But a while back, Sydney had posted a picture of this piece online. And, you know, we already know each other. She's like one of our extended cousins, I guess. And, you know, so I texted her, I said, hey, you know, like, how much is this? How big is it? Tell me about this piece. And so she was like, well, you know, it's out on exhibition right now. You know, so I could bring it back if you want that one, or you could look at another one in a series. And so I said, no, I'm not in a rush. You know, it's great that the piece is out on exhibition. That helps kind of increase the potential value of the piece. And so, you know, we downloaded an image of it while it was on exhibition. It was in the Gentleman Jack traveling art exhibition. And so that's one indicator that a piece is going to be a good pick, is has it been exhibited somewhere? The other biggest one is the artists themselves having a track record of being awarded for their work and being recognized in the community for their artwork. And so as Sydney has you know, as we've known her over the years, she is regularly being rewarded and kind of visible in and around both Detroit and
internationally,
many other cities, particularly with her mural work. You know, so she has a track record of doing the work that an artist needs to do to establish themselves long term. And so it's very different than kind of the person who comes out of art school, gets one exhibition, and then they don't have another body of work, you know, of which to speak. You know, so you want to look for that track record of recognition by the art community and in the general public. And so, you know, we think just like one time Romare Bearden was Romy, you know, one time we think Sidney James is just going to be our Sid, you know, and we're looking forward to
Yeah,
working with.
She's definitely a rising star.
Yeah.
So one to follow, one to watch.
All right, and this is the piece that Henry said we had to comment on the size. So this piece is probably about 6 feet by
8.
It's probably 6 feet by 7 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big piece. There are very few spaces in our house that could hold a piece like that. So it's on display in a large area in our finished basement. So it's a large one. So it's a commitment to get the big pieces.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, that's gorgeous.
All right. So you want to start? You were doing the reference work.
Well, one of my favorite artists is Detroit artist Gilda Snowden, who has gone on to be with the ancestors. But she was a trained artist, also had a professorship at Wayne State and CCS, College for Creative Studies. But her work, and she describes it herself in this book, Gumbo Yaya, is that prior to her parents' passing, her work was more about life, happiness, joy, the living, all things beautiful, aesthetically pleasing. And then, and her parents were a great inspiration to her. Just like, our families make us happy, our families bring us joy. And when her parents passed back in the late 90s, within months of each other, that was a very dark time for her, as she described it. And then her work took on a more abstract appearance, and she kind of used colors of black, purple, red, and kind of stayed with that trend for a while. And so this piece was part of her portrait series, and she kind of describes it as being in a tornado period of her life, a lot of darkness, a lot of turmoil. But what I like in her work is that you can look at it, a couple of times a day and see something different every time, and it speaks to me. I love this piece because, of course, you can see her image, her portrait. That's her self-portrait with her dreadlocks, and you see her head, the silhouette of her head and her shoulders. But just to know the story behind this series, and then to see her work before, what happened in her life, and then her work as she kind of worked through that grief process, I think is a great story.
Yeah, I think my additional bullet point to this is, as an investor or an academic collector, it's always very good if you can find a representation of the piece in a textbook. And so if you look down there in the bottom right, she's photographed standing in front of that self-portrait series. So always a good sign that you've made a good purchase if it's documented in a textbook.
And I guess I would also say about abstract work, because her pieces, Gilda's pieces are the different variety, and she herself had commented that she wanted the viewer to look at her art and find things, because sometimes she had hidden messages in her art. So when her parents passed away, she would put like an A somewhere in her work and a T somewhere in the work. The A stood for Alabama, where her mother was from, and the T stood for Texas, where her father was from. And so she would kind of incorporate different signals or ways to honor her family in her work. And so you can look at her work and find, a lot of different signals and things that you didn't notice before. There's another piece that we have of hers, and it's some type of image that I think she took and kind of did like a batik with it. But when I look at it, I see neurons, and maybe that's the scientist in me. But every time I see it, I think of neurons and synapses and just connections, and just thinking like, what was she thinking when she did this work? And so I've looked at it a couple of different times and just kind of picked up things in her pieces. And so when you can connect with the artist, even though they have gone on to be with the ancestors, and then you read something about the artist that kind of confirms what your feelings were when you looked at their piece, I think that is a very meaningful connection, and makes that piece in your collection all the more meaningful.
Lovely, lovely.
All right. So, here's another reference to the effect on the kids. It's, we don't tell them be artists. We don't tell them that it's important to create. But, as you kind of expose them to it and surround them with it, they develop their own kind of artistic abilities and passion for art itself. And so, we have two that I think are more creative types. And so they spend time drawing, painting, making projects. And so they clearly have a passion for doing the art itself. Now, we will say our son has never really shown a passion for creating art. However, over time, he has become very interested in kind of the business and historical side of the art itself. So he took an African-American history class this year in his school. And they had to do a project of their choosing about Black history. And so what he chose to do his on was the underrepresentation of Blackness in the fine art world. And so he went, that's Henry back right there giving a guided tour of the Detroit Institute of Arts. And you see the Kehinde Wiley, which is one of the showpieces of the Black art exhibit that they have there. They have wonderful representation of African American art. But he kind of, researched, made the project, and then he had to give a presentation. And so, the picture on the right is him essentially holding court, like he had an audience of folks, and he's really just telling them and touting, the value of our stories and talking some about the investment potential. And so while he, doesn't like drawing and painting himself, he clearly does have an appreciation for the value of this art. All right. So, kind of speaking of kind of talking about current events and current times, we very recently lost David Driscoll. David Driscoll is, I would say, the preeminent curator of African American art, and has built up and advised the finest collections of African American art in the country. The Walter Evans collection. He was used to be Detroit physician, now in Savannah, Georgia. Which is probably, at least reportedly, the largest collection of African-American art in the country, but also, the notables, the folks that we all know. So he built the Cosby collection. He advised Oprah on her collection. And, do you want to tell the story about the Cosby show?
So just growing up and being influenced by art, I recall an episode of The Cosby Show where Claire Huxtable had fallen in love with the Funeral March piece. And so I just recalling how Claire ended up winning the piece at the auction. Vanessa invited her friends over and said, "Oh, my mom paid a lot of money for this art." And then Claire then reprimanding Vanessa for sharing that information and saying that was a personal matter. But that piece, I saw it, I loved it. I recall that episode like it was yesterday. As a college student, I went out and got that poster and had it framed in my dorm room. But just the inspiration and knowing that the Cosby collection was put together by David Driscoll, and then being able to have my own Driscoll in my collection kind of brought everything full circle, and I still do have that poster. But it just goes to show the influence that art and being exposed to art and what we see in the media, what we see on TV as children, what we're exposed to by our families really influences who we believe we can be and who we are and who we become. And so this is one of my favorite pieces also. Maybe all of them are my favorite, because I think I've said that about almost everything. But in this piece, if you look very closely, because right away I saw it, I said, that's a white gardenia. And then I looked and I said, that is Billie Holiday. And so if you look, I fell in love with it immediately. I love the colors. I love that Mr. Driscoll paid homage to Billie Holiday. And so it is truly one of my favorite pieces. And when I look at it, I kind of see different things that he pulled into the piece. But just to look there and see her face with that gardenia, it makes me happy.
You know, we were talking about this the other day when we said that if you kind of are going back and looking at the history or understanding specifically African-American art, Black art, then you kind of have to be familiar with Driscoll and some of the processes and ways of looking at things that he kind of instigated and kind of framed in such a way. Was this what you were, I mean, did this immediately come to mind? I mean, and then he's the working artist, of course, and that part of his career has been kind of undersold to some degree because he got such a name as a curator and the person who framed things to that his actual work became a kind of underrated in a sense until recently, I would say.
Until recently, yeah, I would say that. But it's always been beautiful work. But yes, you're absolutely right. Not appreciated as, you know, one of the greats because he was so busy on the being an academician, you know, a curator. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's special to have a Driscoll. Yeah.
All right, so this is a piece by Emma Amos, who also, you know, unfortunately went to be with the ancestors very recently. And so about Emma Amos, so first off, she was the only woman member of a collective of artists. It's called Spiral. And so this was a group of artists that got together in the 1960s, you know, during a lot of the civil rights movement protests. And it was started by Romare Bearden, but had, I mean, just kind of some of the blue chip artists, you know, that today are really being recognized for their work, such as Mayhew, Norman Lewis,
Hale Woodruff.
I mean, just kind of, you know, these are the folks that are in, you know, on that very short list of African American artists.
And she didn't even want to be involved in it. She thought it was.
You know, in reading about it, she had an interesting quote. She said, you know, she wondered why she, as a 27-year-old grad student, was the only woman invited when there were other artists such as Elizabeth Catlett and Betty Saar who had more established careers at that point. And so she concluded that it was because, you know, the men didn't want to be intimidated by some of the more established woman artists. And so she said, black or white, art is still a man's world. You know, so that was one of her, you know, that was one of her things. And I mean, she was an activist. She was a strong feminist. Her chosen, I guess, specialty was printmaking. You know, and
textiles, working with textiles.
Yeah, and so what you can't see in the slide deck is really that you know, she made the paper herself. You know, and so if you ever get a chance to see one of her pieces up close, unframed, you got to touch the paper a little bit. You know, now folks will tell you don't touch the art, but it's really, I mean, it's just this heavy, thick, rich, textured paper. And then by hand, even though a lot of what she did was a print, you know, lithography, she would then go back in and embellish all of them. And so this one, she kind of carved into the paper in different areas. And so, you know, even the ones that were not kind of originals were very low series prints that she then touched on every single one to make it their own. Hold on just a second.
So one of the things that I love about Emma Amos is the fact that she was very intentional in representing who we are as a people. And she commented that she wanted to represent the full spectrum of who we were. So every color, from butterscotch to black, midnight black. And those were her words that I'm using. And so she would, in her work, not only try to capture her ancestors and our history, she would incorporate textiles. She was known to incorporate pieces with West African fabric, so kente, various types of kente cloth. We do have a few pieces with where she has incorporated the kente, but she was very intentional in representing us in her work, which I love, and I think that she was really a badass because she was able to hold her own amongst the men. She's the only woman in spiral, and she held it down for women. And so I applaud her for that, and she's actually one of my favorites. And this is one of my favorite pieces because to me this woman she's regal, and it's called Leopard Woman. And so she had a few pieces that kind of followed this theme of the leopard woman, but just the woman who's exuding confidence, unbothered. And so I really love this piece and what it kind of embodies, and to know who Emma Amos was as a feminist and a civil rights activist, it just kind of ties it all together.
I think of her as you really do think about how strong she was at a time. Being part of Spiral, you had like Weusi, you had these groups which were male dominated, like a lot of the Black arts movement at the time. But she always stood out as this kind of central figure through it all, kind of part of it, kind of pushing it, but not constrained by it. She's always an interesting figure. Yeah.
And I hate to be the police. Police are getting a bad name around here nowadays, right? But we're getting short on time.
All right. Let's see. All right. So we didn't want to miss this one. So this is a piece by Charles White, and it while Charles White did a lot of lithography in his career. In part because he was for a time married to Elizabeth Catlett, who did lithography because she wanted art to be accessible to our people. And she knew that we couldn't, particularly at that time, generally afford to buy original works of art. And so he did do a lot of lithography in his career, but this is not a lithograph. This is a charcoal on Strathmore board. And it's an early piece of his. He would have been about 20 years old when he created this work. So I did want to just read quickly read this paragraph. It starts out, it says, "I've been a stalwart advocate for the legacy of Charles White. I've said it so often it could go without saying. I have always believed that his work should be seen wherever great pictures are collected and made available to art-loving audiences. He is a true master of pictorial art, and nobody else has drawn the black body with more elegance and authority." And then I'll skip a little bit, and it says, "It's the right time for him to be considered again in the fullness of his expertise, and fitting that he should be recognized with a survey in 3 of the best museums in the world." And that paragraph and this chapter in the book is written by a name that most people would recognize, Kerry James Marshall, who is a living working artist who trained under Charles White, who it was recently in the press not that long ago because Puff bought one of his pieces for like $21 million. And so
it was a hot bidding too. It was a hot bidding.
There was a lot of bidding going on. And so his career has taken off, but he has really paid attention to bringing along those people that were underappreciated in their lives and careers. And Charles White is one of those that is now, unfortunately, after he's gone to be with the ancestors, is being recognized for his contribution to art.
That's it. That's it.
All right, and that's it.
Thank you all. And I know that we want to open it up for questions. So what I'm going to do is something that we haven't really done before. And Phil, I don't know if we want to use the raised hand option or just open it up. I'm just going to open up the mics.
Sure. Whatever you feel good about, Drake. That sounds good.
And we'll do it like that. And I'm going to unmute. Well, if you can unmute yourself, because it doesn't look like I can unmute everybody.
So in the left-hand corner is the unmute button, I believe.
If there's anyone who wants to, let me see, ask to unmute. Okay.
I'll just ask one quick question here, guys. Do you see perhaps there being a switch? We were talking a little bit about this earlier, about how more millennials coming into the market who have more idea about buying online. They feel less concerned about this and make almost all their purchases at this point, maybe perhaps online. Do you foresee that this might change how you guys are not the reasoning for why you're doing it, but perhaps the methods that you'll use? Or do you think that people have become more comfortable with buying art online, making this type of purchase digitally?
I think that's an option that is, it's great that we have it, but I still think that art speaks to the soul. There's a connection. It's something to be said about meeting the artist, talking to the artist, getting to know the artist, you know, because that brings to mind when we went to the talk with CC Pounder, and how she shared the story about how she connected with Kehinde Wiley when he was, you know, just a mere starting young artist. And so I think there's something to be said about establishing a rapport with an artist, understanding what they were feeling and how they were living when they were creating the piece. There's that human contact, the human element, I think is important to loving, understanding, appreciating, and purchasing art.
Yeah, I'll agree, it's an option, but it's, you know, to me, it's not a replacement. You know, we have gotten a couple of pieces purely by kind of interaction online. You know, and there, I mean, there's tons of apps out there where you can either participate in auctions. There's apps where galleries list pieces. There's apps where the artists directly list their pieces. You know, I think it does not negate the need to work with a professional if you are doing it for investment purposes. You know, and there are risks to buying things online, you know, especially once you get into somewhat higher price points. You know, sometimes there's a level of trust that you have to have when you write somebody a check and send it off and you've never actually met them face to face.
Yeah,
for sure.
And you know, and one of the things I always say to you, Taft and Sherida, and I always say to you, Phil, is that, you know, in my world and in my view, that you're an art collector, even if you've only had one piece in your house. Is your intention to collect art and to preserve and to begin your journey and to preserve a legacy of, you know, and to preserve the culture, so to speak, as a collector. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have amassed, and I applaud you guys, you all have really, the economy in which you all did this presentation, the discipline that you use, you have so many pieces in your collection that you could have chosen from. So I really applaud you all for for just sticking to just a few. And, you know, I mean,
well, you see, we ran out of time.
Yeah, you did. I was thinking somebody else was going to ask some questions. So if anybody wants to jump in, please, if you can unmute your mic, feel free.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question. Hello? Can you hear me?
Go ahead. We hear you.
Yes, I'm from Chicago. And of course, you know, this is a mecca for art, as far as I'm concerned. Do you, in your collection, have anything by the late Calvin B. Jones or Jeff Donaldson, perchance?
Yeah, Jeff.
Or Margaret Burroughs?
But no, we don't.
Okay.
So just a comment on that. One of the things that we did find out as we got a little more kind of integrated into the art scene is that art collecting, it's generally a very regional activity. And so the group of artists that folks really seek out here in Detroit is going to be somewhat different than the group of artists that folks seek out, and even in a city as close as Chicago, and definitely different than what you would look for in New York or LA.
In Atlanta, even.
You know, I mean, it's a surprisingly regional sort of activity. Folk that will that can command very high prices here in Detroit, you know, they may not even really know about them in Atlanta or New York. So from that standpoint, you know, we have tried to diversify some of our collection and kind of not just stick with Detroit-based artists.
Particularly, neither one of us is a native Detroiter.
Yeah, you know, but you know, to comment on that question is that, you know, the artist, you know, the collecting world in Chicago is going to focus on certain artists, and the collecting world in Detroit is going to focus on certain artists. And, you know, it's not that there's no mixing. It's just, it's probably less than people think.
You know, I have a little footnote on that, that last question. Was that Sandra who asked that question?
Correct.
So.
Correct.
Sandra, you know, I that's the second time I've heard of Calvin B. Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And coincidentally, one of our other Morehouse brothers actually bought Margaret Burroughs' old home, and he discovered lots of pieces that she had in the DeSable Museum that he has now in his possession. So,
wow.
Is his name Munson Steve, perchance?
Yes, it is.
Okay, my last name is Steve.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's
Small
quite
world.
yeah.
Thank you so much. I really did appreciate one point that you made, and that was to diversify your collection. I've been collecting for a long time, and I go with pieces that I really like, period.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of, you know, emotional attachment. Going back to Calvin B. Jones, he was a muralist also. He was a visual artist who was a muralist, did a number of murals around the city of Chicago and other places as well. So I just thought perhaps you might have been familiar with him.
Yeah, and you know, I'll let me just riff off of your comment, and after we're done, Henry will probably call us and cuss me out about this. But you know, I always say that there's so much great art out there that you generally should get things that you just like. You know, now there is kind of a strategy to it if you're also trying to invest. But you know, I that's kind of a thing that we have generally taken, is that we get art that we like, mm-hmm. you know, and we tend to focus on things that have that potential. But you know, there's a whole nother strategy that says, you know, get some pieces just because they're important and they have investment potential. But there's tons of great art out there, and you know.
And one of the things that we didn't touch on, but is important, especially if you are really considering art seriously, is to have your art appraised. Yeah. Yes. Photograph, catalog, appraise, document your art's provenance, and keep that in an area where it's safe, and that you know, we tend to keep an envelope on the back of our pieces with the provenance history, the bill of sales, the certificate of authenticity, but we also have had our art appraised. You know, as we move along, because it would be quite an endeavor if you amass a huge collection and very expensive to then go back and get it appraised.
Yeah, and just as an FYI, once you get into collecting fine art, that ain't covered in your homeowner's insurance policy.
Okay.
So we have met people who have lost like an entire art collection because they had a fire in their house. And so, you know, once you get to you know, getting a collection where you have several pieces that are worth more than about, you know, $1,000, you probably should go through the effort of having it appraised and informing your homeowner's insurance. It's not expensive to cover a good sized collection, but if you don't cover it, they ain't giving you the money for that back. That's a specific right you have to have.
I also want to say that I had the opportunity to visit the David Driscoll Center in Maryland some time ago. And it was wonderful. I don't remember exactly what that particular exhibit was, but I was there on one occasion, and after that I would receive flyers, information about upcoming exhibits, and I will never forget that he did make a mega impact on the art world. Also, I go to Swan galleries just to see, they will announce in advance who's going to be, what's going to be up for auction.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting to go in and see what is available to our community.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because it's a big part of a lot of strategies in terms of looking at auctions. And they scale, just like we were talking earlier about the art fairs, the art auctions also scale. So if you're not in the market, of course, to go to, for example, Swan, where you have very high pieces, or Christie's or something of that nature, there are plenty of ones. There are a lot of universities, the MFA programs that have these things, auctions and such. And it's a great way to be introduced to artists at a great price point. MFA fairs, the graduation exhibitions and such. There's another great way to find young artists to support and build with their career as well. So there are a lot of things open to us. In this, it seems like we're just looking at it, but there are a lot of avenues for us to be able to navigate our world. And as we always say, the great relationship is that the artist and the artist, there's not much more of a simpatico relationship than that. When a person gets a great work of art and the artist gets paid for their hard work, so it's a whole world out there for us.
Yep. And you know something, I wanted to just add to that. There are a number of great ways. I know you all that the Parsons talked about art fairs, but here locally in Detroit, we have a number of different ways to really tap into the art market. If you're a new art collector, you have the Detroit Breakfast Club, Detroit Fine Arts Breakfast Club, which is run by Henry Harper, whose name is right here in chat. We also have the National Council of the Artists here in Detroit as well. We have a number of curators locally who are very knowledgeable. There are lots of knowledgeable curators here that I'm sure are mirrored in other markets. So you just want to find out who those people are, and I think Sandra sounds like she might be a good person to know in Chicago for that very purpose. But there's definitely great ways to get close to the arts and the artists that you like to collect that don't necessarily involve having to go the traditional gallery route.
Yeah, and so we saw in the chat, Anne put the question in, how, if you're thinking about getting more serious about art collecting, how can you get in touch with a curator? So I will plug our curator here in Detroit, Henry Harper, and if you need to get in contact with him, after it's done, you can reach out to us, or Drake also has his contact information. But in whatever city you're in, if you start going to exhibitions and gallery shows and network with folks, you will meet curators at those shows.
And the curators do have a network, so Henry does have contacts in other cities.
Yes. And so you have to have somebody who you feel like you fit with them, and who's going to be able to spend some time with you kind of locally as well. But
Phil is a Henry in New York.
Right, New York, right?
Yeah.
The host here.
No, he knows who they are.
I need one in Boston. So
the last thing I want to say relative to this presentation today, I've enjoyed every single nanosecond of it, and I applaud what you're doing as a couple. There is a couple here that has an African-American gallery. It's called the Gouchard Gallery. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a husband and wife team who are doing some fantastic work in terms of bringing in up and coming artists and what have you. And they recently had a Zoom meeting where they took you on a tour of their gallery. It's right in the heart of what we call Bronzeville in Chicago on 47th Street. And so there, Francis and Andre Gouchard, that's a couple you need to know about. One curator that your contact probably knows is Diane Dinkins, Dinkins Carr, possibly. She's excellent here in the city of Chicago. Chicago is, as I said, it's a hotbed. And I understand what you're saying in terms of the various and sundry venues have their own people who you are more than cognizant of and that you can connect to. My overriding feeling about this art thing is that we as a people need to deal with our heritage, and we need to be at the top of the food chain in terms of making certain that our posterity see what we do and understand and appreciate what this art means to us as a people. It is critical that we continue this legacy of our, because in terms of our culture, we've always been so creative. And so we need to understand that, appreciate it. I do. When that Charles White exhibit came to the Art Institute of Chicago, I was one of the first people in line. I went to see it more than once. It was riveting, in a word, riveting. And it just touched my heart greatly. I almost had a chance to meet his former wife, Elizabeth Catlett. She was here, another gallery, a Nicole gallery at the time, I believe it was. But she had been talking to people for so long, and I was toward the end of the line, and they said, sorry for cutting this off. But I did see her in person, did not have an opportunity to speak directly with her, but I'll never forget that, period. Thank you so much for your presentation today. I've enjoyed it and would not have missed it for a moment.
Fantastic.
Thank you, fantastic. We've reached the bewitching hour. And you know, you all don't have to go anywhere, but I do.
All right, guys. So once again, I want to thank everybody. This has been fantastic. I can't think of a better way to have spent time during everything that's been going on. Please know that we're going to be connected. We're going to stay connected so we can let you know when our next series starts up. Another great collection of artists and gallerists and collectors and enthusiasts. And I want to really thank Taft. You guys are the best. Taft and Sherida Parsons. Fantastic. I love the way that you guys communicated all of the elements of collecting and what it brings to the lives of the collectors. So fantastic, and thank you for that. And that's it for me. So please look out for us being connected. You can always follow us, C3 Arts Radio, at C3 Arts Radio on Instagram and Twitter. And please look out for Drake and I to come back with another group. Drake, I'll let you sign out. All right, and yes, thank you, Parsons. You all did a great job. This was excellent. Thank you, everyone who has been along with us on this ride. I don't know who else has been here every time, but I know Ann from Boston has been here every time. Ann is the best. Ann has been along for the ride. So Ann, I got to give you big ups, and I think Tracy Williams might actually be up there too. And Taft, you've been here.
Yeah, we've been on everyone.
I've been in the background sometimes.
Maybe not on time, but we've been in there.
I rushed today from baseball, so I was like, yeah, let's get home.
Thank you, Bill and Drake, for the opportunity to share. We love art. It's a pleasure, a privilege to be able to share.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sherida, for the wonderful presentation.
And for those questions that we weren't able to answer, I'll try to send them in an email once we send a wrap-up email. All right. Send this video out.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you, guys.
Stay safe, everybody, and still wear your mask.
Right.
Yes.
Mask.
Still wear your mask.
All right. Okay.